Welcome and thank you for being part of the 4i Books author series. I'm Cameron, the founder of 4i Books, a space where we explore stories that shape the way we see the world using our four lenses: place, memory, voice, and resonance. Today we're chatting about your story, One Thing About Blue, featured in Sacramento Noir, part of Akashic Books' acclaimed Noir Series. Ooh, thank you. A collection known for pairing noir fiction with real life settings to reveal the shadows of cities around the world. This interview is part of our Sacramento Noir series, which is a celebration highlighting how fiction can illuminate Sacramento and what it what it has to offer. I'm excited to dive into your story, the quiet tension that runs beneath it, and the glimpses that Sacramento offers emergence. So to start us off, could you introduce yourself, share a little about your story, and tell a little bit what your connection to Sacramento is?
So my name is Maureen O'Leary, and my story is One Thing About Blue, and it's about a young girl suffering a traumatic brain injury who is recently released from prison, who takes a job at a charter school, a night custodian job at a charter school, and finds that her old partner in crime has engineered her employment there, and she has a new scheme. And that's the tagline. I just came up with. That's pretty good.
That's pretty good, yeah. uh, and what's your connection to Sacramento?
Oh, I was born in Jackson Heights in Queens, New York, and my parents moved us out to California when I was very small. And I grew up in the Bay Area in a little town called Pittsburgh that's on the Delta there. And my husband and I moved to Sacramento 20 years ago when he got a job teaching at Sac State. And so we've raised our kids here, and I've worked here as a teacher in four different schools. So we live in
Fantastic.
Sacramento.
Nice. Yeah, I always tell folks like Sacramento is very underrated. I was talking with the Jose body about that last week. It's like there's
Right,
so
because
much different.
He's a recent transplant from the Bay Area.
He is, yeah, and it's something like the overall theme of the Sacramento Noir, especially that I love, is that really highlights the true diversity of Sacramento and the variety of the neighborhoods and the peoples, and I haven't seen that yet, which was a true standout. And not because I'm biased,
As
but
in depth and as comprehensive as the anthology is, there's more to Sacramento.
oh yeah, absolutely. Just scratching the surface.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a little silly that my neighborhood that I talk about is Oak Park, only because I've taught there for 15 years
Hmm.
and spend a lot of time in Oak Park. But I'm a white lady writing about Oak Park, and I've only lived in Sacramento for 20 years. I'm a recent transplant.
Hmm.
One thing that I found really interesting about Sacramento is that people stay, and people have their families go way back.
Hmm.
And for a Western city, I think we have that's unique. I used to live in Berkeley, I lived in
Hmm.
Eureka, I lived in Pittsburgh, I lived in
Hmm.
Santa Cruz. Everyone's sort of a recent transplant.
Yeah, there's definitely a long history. Like even for me, like my grandmother and my great aunt on my mom's side grew up in Locke in Walnut
See what I'm
Creek.
saying?
Yeah, it's like I have like deep connections to that
Mhm.
town, which always makes me happy. So it's like uh and then so much really going back like Gold Rush, all that.
Yeah, I'm
Like so
fascinated by Locke. That whole area shows up in my fiction all the time.
yeah, there's so much in the Delta just driving down, like through like Isleton and the
Yep.
Delta. We take drives down there. But anyway, that's
Yeah, I'm obsessed with the Delta.
yeah.
I really am. Most of my fiction takes place at least partly in the
Mm.
Sacramento Delta.
Ooh, looking forward to that. uh, so, first kind of formal question, thank you, is one thing about Blue feels like it's narrated from inside of memory, kind of soft focus, but heavy with meaning. How did you arrive at that emotional tone? Was it instinctive or is it shaped in revision? What was how that tone come to be?
Oh, I totally did it on purpose. Down to right. But I will say that I had a teacher in my MFA named Kirsten Chen who wrote Counterfeit and uh, We Bury What We Cannot Take and some other novels and stories. And she's a brilliant writer. And one question she made us consider is who's telling the story and why? And I think that informed this story. Who's telling? I really wanted why I envisioned Blue working at the gym, where she ends up, spoiler alert, she ends up working at a gym at the very end of the story, kind of relaying the story to someone who's tired of exercising and is coming and talking to her at the counter. And once I sort of understood who she was telling the story to and why, I was able to embody that voice, and she's remembering it through TBI. So her view of what's going on around her is somewhat disordered, somewhat limited. So that was a part of it too.
Mm. And Shape coming off of that one, kind of talking about kind of the worldview and their emotional journey. Um, that emotional texture just goes right through like kind of her kind of navigating the world. Blue seems to be lived by that constant reinvention, new names, new
Mm-hmm.
hustles, new rules, new identities. Um, where like what do you think that meant for B's journey in terms of like survival, performance, distance, you know?
Well, yeah, that's a recurring theme in my work too. The notion of reinvention, reinventing the self, this idea that your outward facing mask can be kind of anything you want it to be.
Mm,
And for women in particular, or for people who are marginalized in any way, there's just a tremendous amount of code switching that has to happen
mm,
in order to be able to function in society. So that is kind of a recurring theme. I'm interested in how people do that and how people, reclaim their own place, their own piece of the pie. One
mm,
thing that interests me really about California and writing about California in general, not just Sacramento, is that we're adjacent to, I mean, some of the wealthiest people in the world. And we have the sixth largest economy in the whole entire world just within our
mm,
state. And
mhm,
yet we have people living under the freeway in boxes. We have,
mhm,
women who are living below the poverty line, trying to raise kids, trying to make a way in the world. And the people on the margins are what interests me the most.
mm,
And that's, I think, what interests me about changing your name and becoming a different person. And I think for a lot of women, that's in some way, I mean, Maureen O'Leary was my maiden name, but I teach under a completely different name.
mm,
And when I got married, my identity changed. I just feel that when I became a mom, my identity changed. I'm a
mm,
different person at work than I am on the
mhm,
page than I am at home. And I think that code switching is kind of part of
mm,
the female, probably everybody's existence at some point, but in some ways, but certainly the female experience.
mm,
And
mhm.
I'm a white female. Everybody likes me. Like I'm just interested in the
Uh,
I'm very interested in how marginalized people get their piece of the pie
mhm.
in California in particular.
Right. Just such extremes.
Hmm.
It's, my wife and I talk about this too. It's like in terms of, some in the neighborhoods, like just sometimes it feels like every other street is like, either really nice upscale street, and the next street is, maybe a street that's more run down. And so it's like, an interesting weave in some neighborhoods.
It is. It's a
Yeah,
fascinating
you never
part. It's
know.
a fascinating
Yeah.
part about living in Sacramento because there's no gates, and
Hmm.
there's no major freeways bisecting many of our neighborhoods.
Hmm.
I mean, Oak Park blends into Curtis Park, it blends into Land Park.
Hmm.
I'm down the street at Tahoe Park,
Oh, yeah.
and you're just drive half a mile and you're in a completely different socioeconomic reality.
Yeah, it's still always so surprising, like how, yeah, Sacramento's like spread out, but like how small it is sometimes at the
Mm-hmm.
same time. Because I'm on the
Oh,
other
it's
side.
just
I'm in Curtis, so goes across the way, so
yeah.
not very far.
It's
Yeah,
the smallest town I've ever lived
yeah,
in, and I've lived
yeah.
in towns with maybe a quarter. I've lived in very small towns. I used to live
Mm,
in Quincy. I lived in
mm,
Arcata. This
mm.
is
Oh,
in
nice.
as
Yeah.
far as interconnectedness.
Hmm.
This is the smallest town I've ever lived in.
Hmm. Yeah, and s- and where it's located, I was once again talking with connecting back to Jose, like where Sacramento's, you can get anywhere, like so many from Sacramento, like
Hmm.
go back to the Bay, go up to like Tahoe, go to like, the beach. There's so much variety within a short distance. Then you get down to the, Central Valley, but that's a different story.
Yeah, I don't know anything about it. I'm
Yeah.
interested in it.
Yeah, and that's how like we love to like just to travel, there's so many like different spots and towns just to explore. Not
Hmm.
very far. Maybe that'd be a different series in the future. Um, zoom, kind of continue the theme of kind of zooming out a little bit. Um, uh, that's kind of sensing shift of self happens within like that larger system. The charter school scenes and characters like Mr. Lewis and Jim Bell create a feeling of being watched or being used. Like where you think about systems, well, I think you answered on this a little bit, but where you think about systems of power and exploitation when writing those scenes,
I
a little
was.
bit.
I don't want to. I mean,
Yeah,
this is
go.
fiction, but I've been teaching in schools for 30 years, and I
Mm-hmm.
think I said this at the time-tested panel that if you really want to learn about the corruption in a city, working at schools.
Mm-hmm.
Schools are, especially schools that purport to serve students who live under the poverty line and or are eligible for free and reduced lunch. If
Mm-hmm.
you have a lot of those students in your school, it is going to be rife with corruption. Although any school really, there's just a lot of opportunity for embezzlement.
Mm-hmm.
And charter schools in particular have so little oversight, yet they're eligible for federal monies and they can also raise funds. And if you have just a couple of unscrupulous individuals in those positions, it really is a moneymaker. If you have no soul, it is a moneymaker. And I was interested in a character who would Blue,
Mm-hmm.
who sees the writing on the wall and gets in on that action.
Yeah, those scenes felt like very much like a classic corporate crime, like wheeling dealing behind closed doors kind of deals. Like you didn't know who to trust or who is really conning who, really.
Yeah,
Yeah, it's like
I'm fascinated by that.
yeah, it's
I'm
like who.
fascinated by that noir. I'm fascinated by scams.
Hmm.
I really am.
Hmm.
Because with to run a scam, all you have to do is be willing to lie. Because most people will believe you if you're
Hmm.
acting serious.
Yeah.
And I just think I think I find scams fascinating. I think I myself am a compulsively honest person, but I've also worked in schools, and I've had the opportunity, for instance, with to be handling large amounts of cash that I'm the one who's responsible for reporting. I mean, things like that, where I'm like, if I
Yeah.
was a bad person or just a little greedy, I could pocket large portions of this cash and no one would be the wiser. And when I have a master's in educational leadership and policy studies.
Hmm.
And in my finances class, a lot of this was broken down exactly why it's possible. I'm like,
Hmm.
no wonder.
Yeah.
I've been in the front row of a lot of this in private schools too.
Mhm.
And there's just, and so anyways,
Yeah,
those are
it's
what I know. So that's what I wrote about.
yeah, I mean it makes sense. Like I think it's another reason why this collection stood out too. And especially of course like going to the different book events and doing these interviews, like how much personal story and like is like infused into each collection and the stories, like oh like personal histories and experiences. Like I think that really continues to make this series special, and this one especially. But it's like oh, now I have to go back, and now after doing the interviews I go back and rereading after the interview. It's like oh, okay, that's way too specific. Like okay, I know where you're coming from.
Yeah, I think every
I
city,
dig it.
I enjoy the Noir series too.
Hmm.
Yeah, I've read a couple of Oakland and Santa Cruz in
Hmm.
particular. And I think
Yeah.
every city has its own character and it's corrupt in its own way.
Oh yeah. Yeah, it's a different. Yeah, which one's my favorite? Different flavor. Yeah, I read the Buffalo. First pick the ones I lived in. Like the Buffalo one was really good, and the Santa
I've
Cruz one
heard
was
that one's
great.
good. Yeah.
Yeah, I lived in Buffalo for a few years for grad school. So I think it's when I first started discovering the series. But yeah, and now you're like really brings it to life, especially when you're like you see what's even it's fiction. It's like you kind of see a little glimpses.
I think what's interesting about Sacramento Noir for me
Mm-hmm.
too are the historical pieces, like
Mm-hmm.
Maureen's
Me too.
pieces and Jose's piece, because I mean we are an old city for the West because we were a point.
Yeah, so lots of along the transcontinental.
Right.
Hmm.
And ships coming through and
Hmm.
up and down the river and things like that in the gold rush. I just think we're old for it, but man, we're just beginning to open our eyes to the devastation and violence in our own city. I mean, they changed the Sutter Middle School to Miwok. I
Hmm.
mean, people still go visit that Sutter's Fort for a
Yeah, they're going.
field trip.
Yeah,
It should be a Holocaust museum. It should
yeah,
be a
they're
Holocaust museum.
yeah they're going through the reinvention of their plan. Uh, I my wife works for the California State Road Museum, so I got insight of like in working for and like the state parks and all the changes
Mhm.
they're making. I know that was a big lightning rod that place.
Yeah, that's
So
interesting.
they're talking about it, yeah.
Mhm.
But uh, yeah, so fascinating.
Mhm.
Um, and then I think for the interest of time, because I have only the free Zoom version.
Oh, I get it.
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah.
I
So
know.
it's
I
like
use that too.
yeah. So it's like it's like, oh, at least, right now it's like, oh, like the 30, 40 minutes, like keeps it, keeps it focused and keeps it light. Like people can check out just like these short interviews or whatever. But before if there's anything else you wanted to add, the legacy question I like to ask, and kind of thinking about storytelling, is when readers look back on the story or your work in general, what do you hope stays with them? What kinds of things are you hoping kind of legacy? I mean, not legacy is kind of a big word, but what kind of things are you shaping through memory and place and through that storytelling?
The themes I like to work with are always about, like I said, women in particular who are really insisting on on friendship and connection and community and love in the wake of post trauma
Mm,
and in the
mm,
wake of being marginalized in a very wealthy society that really doesn't want to hear from them. I'm
mm,
interested
mhm,
in the stories of people who are working really hard to have a good life and are insisting on it for themselves despite being squished,
mm,
being squashed by either violence or economic oppression and things like that. That's what I'm interested in.
mm,
I'd like the legacy of my work to be hard won hope,
mm.
really, and in a way that's not sentimental. That's really telling the truth of the person's of a character's lived experience.
Oh no,
Um,
absolutely. I love that
I grew
phrase.
up in Pittsburgh, man. I went to public schools in Pittsburgh, California. I was in class with kids who came from all over the world, recent
Mm,
Vietnam refugees, people who whose families came, at post World War II to buy homes in that city because none of this, because it was the only place where people of color could buy property, Pittsburgh.
mhm,
And in some ways, it was kind of a rough place to grow up. There weren't a lot of bookstores or anything like that for a nerdy kid like me, but it really gave me a sense of the fact that everybody deserves to be able to make a living. Everybody deserves to be happy and to feel included and to belong and to contribute and to live in a community that loves and supports them. And sometimes the machinery of a city or the machinery of an economy tries to grind people down, but
mhm,
people keep coming up.
mhm,
And I think that that's Georgian blues story.
mhm.
And that's what
Yeah.
interests me.
Yeah, I love that. Hard won hope. That's definitely something that is more needed every day as we see things, how things are going.
I agree. It's about,
Yeah,
people like
yeah,
you and me saying, hey,
yeah,
I like books, you like books, let's talk about them.
yeah, just chat.
It's
Yeah,
friendship and community.
mhm,
We're doing it right now. I believe in it.
absolutely. Well, thank you. That was a wonderful note to end on. Is
Mm.
there anything you wanted to add or promote or
I
anything you
love
wanted to
this
mention?
project. I think it's really awesome.
Oh,
I'm
thank you.
taking a picture. Is that okay? I'm going to put this
Oh,
on.
yeah,
I'm
yeah.
so excited to be interviewed,
Yeah.
to be a part of this. I love talking about stories with other people who read, and I think your questions were really, really insightful, and I'm honored to be any small part of this project. I think it's fantastic.
Thank you. Yeah. So as we wrap up, the quote I like to say is, or the tagline for 4A Books is, turn the page, take the trip, what new perspective awaits.
I love it.
So thank you, Maureen, and um, we will end the recording.
Thanks.
Have a great day.
You too.